humanity's first leap beyond memory.
5,000 years ago, no one could send a message, record a law, or preserve a story beyond living memory. Words vanished the moment they were spoken. Then, in the fertile lands of Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, something changed. Human speech found a physical form. Writing was born. The breakthrough did not begin with poetry or philosophy. It began with a problem. Cities were growing. Trade expanded, temples managed grain, livestock, oil, and labor. Memory was no longer enough. In the bustling city of Uruk, administrators needed a reliable way to track goods moving in and out of storage. The solution was simple but effective. Small clay tokens represented specific commodities. A cone might stand for a measured portion of grain. A sphere could represent livestock. These tokens function like physical data units, allowing merchants and officials to account for complex transactions without written language. As trade networks expanded, the system became harder to manage. Tokens were placed inside sealed clay envelopes called bulla to prevent tampering. The outside surface was pressed with impressions of the tokens within, serving as a preview of the contents. Then came a realization that changed everything. The tokens themselves were unnecessary. The impressions alone could carry the meaning. Flat clay tablets replaced envelopes. Instead of storing objects, scribes pressed symbols directly into wet clay. This stage is often called proto-writing. The marks recorded quantities and commodities, but they did not yet capture full speech. Writing at this stage was an administrative tool, precise and practical. Over time, scribes refined their technique. Using a cut-reed stylus, they pressed wedge-shaped marks into clay. The script that emerged is known as cuneiform. It was faster to produce than detailed drawings and easier to standardize. Efficiency mattered in a growing urban society. Early signs resembled the objects they represented. A head indicated a person, a jar indicated oil. Yet repetition gradually simplified the shapes. What began as pictures turned into abstract patterns of wedges. The script evolved visually as it adapted to the needs of speed and clarity. The most important leap came when symbols began to represent sounds as well as objects. This shift allowed writing to move beyond inventory lists. By applying what scholars call the rebus principle, a sign could convey a syllable based on pronunciation, rather than meaning alone. Writing could now reflect language itself. Once writing captured sound, its potential expanded rapidly. Names could be recorded. Verbs and grammar could be expressed. Abstract ideas became writable. Clay tablets were no longer limited to barley and sheep. They became vehicles for communication across time and space. By the 3rd millennium BCE, scribes trained in formal schools mastered hundreds of signs. Writing had become an institution. In city-states governed by complex administrations, literacy was specialized knowledge. Those who could write held authority within temple and palace systems. Legal systems also relied on written form. The Code of Hammurabi, created under the Babylonian king Hammurabi in the 18th century BCE, was inscribed in cuneiform. Laws carved into stone projected permanence and order. Writing reinforced political power and social structure. Literature soon followed administration. Stories that once circulated orally were preserved on clay. The Epic of Gilgamesh, compiled from earlier Sumerian poems, explored friendship, mortality, and the limits of human ambition. Tablets discovered centuries later in the library of Ashurbanipal show how writing preserved memory across generations. Although invented by the Sumerians, cuneiform did not remain confined to one language. It was adapted by Akkadian speakers and later used by Babylonians and Assyrians. For nearly 3 millennia, wedge-shaped signs dominated written communication across much of the ancient Near East. Cuneiform was powerful but demanding. Mastery required years of training. Over time, simpler systems emerged. Among them was the Phoenician alphabet, which reduced writing to a small set of consonantal signs. This streamlined approach influenced Greek and later Latin scripts. The letters used in much of the modern world ultimately trace back through these alphabetic systems. The visual forms changed, but the underlying principle remained the same. Spoken language could be captured, stored, and transmitted beyond the limits of memory. Archaeological discoveries in the 19th century revealed thousands of tablets buried for millennia. Administrative accounts, scientific observations, hymns, letters, and contracts emerged from the soil. Each tablet offered a glimpse into daily life in ancient cities. Writing had done exactly what it was meant to do. It preserved information. The invention of writing was not a single dramatic moment. It was a gradual transformation shaped by economic necessity and human ingenuity. What began as a way to track grain evolved into a system capable of recording law, literature, mathematics, and history. Today, when you send a message or type on a screen, you participate in that same tradition. The material has changed from clay to silicon, but the impulse remains constant. We write to remember, to organize, to communicate, and to leave something behind. So the next time you type an email, send a text, or even just jot down a grocery list, take a moment to think about its ancient roots. It all started with a Sumerian scribe, a piece of wet clay, and a reed stylus making simple wedge-shaped marks that would fundamentally change the course of human history. From those humble clay tablets to the digital code on our screens, it's all part of the incredible, ongoing story of writing. Thanks for joining me on this journey back in time. If you enjoyed uncovering this piece of ancient history, don't forget to subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories that shaped our world. See you next time.